Belisarius Prime has been officially in Rise of Kingdoms for about 2 days now, and everyone can say he's obviously not better than Nevsky or Hao Bing or Joan Prime, but there is one commander who is highly contested with him, and that is William I. So in today's video, I'll be answering a question I've been receiving a lot. Do I get William or do I get Belisarius Prime? So if you're interested in my opinion on both the commanders, what they're both going to do well compared to each other, and what they both lack at, and you want to know which commander you should get depending on your account, you want to stick around till the end of the video. Now let's start off with what William has going for him. What does he do well? And the first thing that William does pretty good is just the fact that he has an AoE. This is something that he's going to beat Belisarius Prime on, because Belly doesn't have an AoE. And that's one thing a lot of cav mains want. They want some form of AoE like Joan Prime, and William does give you an AoE. Of course, it is only in a rectangle area, and if you've seen William's AoE, it is very, very underwhelming. It's like a very small rectangle, but in big open field fights, you're going to get some pretty decent value out of his AoE. Do keep in mind though, it is a low damage factor, and he is an older commander, which is something you should consider. Another good thing about William though is one of the more powerful things in his kit, and it's about his active skill, making it so that your opponents cannot benefit from buffs that increase skill damage. So anything that increases skill damage, that's just not going to work when William hits them with this active skill for the next 3 seconds. So if you can outrage your opponents and you hit them with that buff, if it's for an example an archer commander who has a pretty good skill damage buff, then they're not going to benefit from it. So do keep that in mind. It's definitely very good, especially with a commander like Hao Bing, which I'll talk about in a minute. But that is definitely one of the stronger things in his kit and something a lot of people do like. His second skill here, you gain 20% attack, which is below meta, and about 15% march speed. Also, when he's outside of Alliance territory, you do get 10% more damage, which is decent. Actually, it's quite good to have while outside of territory, so this skill is some pretty good stats. Another thing that William does well is he's also giving you some really, really good buffs. When you look at William, if his active skill hits more than 2 targets, he's going to give yourself and 5 allied troops, including this commander's troop, an extra 50 rage per second and 10% defense for 3 seconds. This buff is probably the main reason people run William still. If he didn't have this, he would have already been fully out of the meta. But the fact that he's going to give you such a high amount of rage to 5 marches makes him a really good commander to have as a rage engine for your other commanders. And that's definitely something you should consider. I would also say though that William doesn't need a very high investment. You can go 5-5-5-1 and you're in a really good position. And the real reason you do this is because these first 3 skills, these are all stat skills. They're all going to give William bonuses, they're all going to make him deal more damage, they're all going to give him stats. But this 4th skill here, the only thing you really care about, while the defense is nice if you only hit 1 target, and the defense for your other troops is also nice if you hit more than 1 target, the main thing you care about this skill is the extra rage, and 50 rage per turn stays at 50 rage per turn no matter what level this skill is. So pretty much you're getting 95% of the value for the Scourge of the North skill, his 4th skill here, even at level 1. So it's definitely nice to have this much cheaper investment on William where you don't need to go on expertise, because again, his expertise as well, it's not that big of a bonus. It just makes his 2nd skill give him a 10% bigger attack bonus. So it's his 3rd skill, his attack increases by 10%, and he has a 10% chance to deal 1,000 damage factor instead of 800. So there's not a massive increase in his stats here. It's really like a 10% total increase on this skill. It's not the most important expertise. So a 5-5-5-1 William, even nowadays, is perfectly fine, and he doesn't actually need that expertise to get much value. And once again, his 4th skill, while maxed out, is obviously nice. It doesn't even need that since you're getting pretty much all the value from it being at level 1. One other thing I will mention that William has going for him, which I don't usually get to talk about, is the fact he's in the daily special offer. Just that is definitely a very nice thing to have with a commander. The fact that in the daily special offer, you can spend money on them, you can get them that way, you don't have to use any gold heads, and of course that also means he's in the legendary chest. So if you needed William sculptures, you can also get him out of here, which once again means even more free value for him. So even though he is an older commander, there's actual ways to access him instead of having to spend gems to spin the Wheel of Fortune, which means not only is he a much cheaper investment, he's also a much more efficient investment, because you might be able to get 100 or so gold heads for free, depending on if you do Legendary Chest Heart's Desire, if you buy him out of the daily special offer. All of these things will allow you to get even more William sculptures which is a very nice bonus. And that's something I think a lot of players would be quite happy to have, is just more value for a commander who is already a really cheap investment compared to some of the other more meta commanders. Now, as for some of the weaknesses in William's kit, there are a few which I would like to mention. One I already mentioned, the fact that his active skill is very low damage. This damage factor right here, Zulang has it on a 4th skill, not even his active skill, just as a bonus. So the damage on William, it's very low. Even though it's an AoE, it is not going to be dealing too much damage, and unless you're going to get a lot of hits on an opponent, you're not going to see too much value out of this AoE. Don't get me wrong, it's still nice, of course, but it isn't as meta, it's not 5 targets, and it's not too overpowered. The other thing with William, he's very old, so a lot of his stats aren't up to the meta values. I mean, the second skill here, if this had 10% more attack and 5% more march speed, it would be a meta skill, but it doesn't have those stats. It's just those small things which do make him a little bit weaker. And then other than that, he's just an older commander, which is always a very big disadvantage in this game. Backwards investing is never a really good thing. Whenever you grab old commanders, they tend to fall out the meta fairly quickly after that. The only time we've ever really seen old commanders revived is like Alexander the Great and Constantine with the new Garrison meta. But really, older commanders, once they're dead, they usually stay dead unless they get a museum relic. And I can probably say that William won't be getting a museum relic for at least the next year to year and a half, since we just saw the Attila Takeda relic. So definitely a big disadvantage with William. It means he's only really going to lose value as time goes on, but we should consider that he is still quite a strong commander in today's current meta, and one thing we should note is he does give you a lot of value even for a smaller murder ball. Now, as for the new commander Belisarius Prime, what are some of the things that he does pretty well? And the first one I will say is he's just got a meta active skill, just in terms of damage. Even though it isn't an AoE like William, it is still some really decent damage to have on an active skill, 2,400, which is 100 more than Nevsky, so definitely is a nice thing to have on Belisarius, and he's also a brand new commander, so all of his stats are really quite close to a meta level, even though he is quite a stat low commander. The rest of his kit kind of makes up for the lack of stats, and that is something we definitely should consider. Also, he does have a very unique debuff on his active skill, making it so that rage requirements are increased for your opponent. It is pretty much a silence without being a silence, so if you get it to time really well with your opponents, you can silence commanders like Boudica and Zhuge Liang without them being able to shrug it off, which is definitely a more unique effect to have, and it's pretty much just like giving Guan Yu silence without an AoE to a Cav commander. Obviously not as OP as Guan Yu, but it's definitely still powerful, and it is something that's going to give him a lot of value in 1v1s for what that's worth. And even in open field, if you can silence someone before they can throw that active skill on you and then you run away, obviously that's good. And this can be a maximum, from what I'm going to guess, as around a 3-second silence, because you can increase their rage requirement by up to 300, because they'll lose some rage each turn. So definitely a nice thing to have this silence on a commander, and it is a good counter towards archers. The other thing we should also note with Belisarius, he's definitely countering a lot of the more meta archer commanders, even like Boudica Prime. Whenever a commander's troop has less than 80% units, Belisarius will deal more skill damage, which is nice to have against a commander like Boudica, who when they reach less than 80% units, they gain a bunch of defense. So definitely, he's out there to counter some of the newer archers. William doesn't really do that. He's just an older commander who counters some of the older commanders who aren't really used. But Belisarius counters Hermann pretty well from what I've seen, and he definitely is a massive Boudica counter. So Belisarius right now, he's countering a lot of archers, that's good to have, and that's obviously going to make him very useful in a current murder ball. Another thing with Belisarius is his 4th skill here, or his expertise, sorry, which is his most powerful thing. This debuff can give you up to 60% all damage in a 5-march murder ball, which is insane, because each march will be dealing 12% more all damage. It's a lot of all damage to give to a murder ball, much more than William's rage gain can probably do if you're not running 5 marches. So I think Belisarius' expertise is one of the more powerful things we've seen in terms of just debuffing, and it's instant. There's no charge up, there's no timer, it's just a bang, you get 60% more all damage as long as Belisarius is in your ball. So it really does make up for a lot of these stats which are kind of lost from the 1st to 4th skill, just because that expertise is very powerful. Now that being said, Belisarius does have a few disadvantages. First of all, I mean, he's not the most insane commander. We can say that already. We've seen it. He's not as good as HB, not as good as Nevsky, not as good as Joan. He doesn't have AoE. Another thing a lot of people are saying is a reason that William is better, and that is a fair point. No AoE does usually equal weaker commander, But we have to consider that Belisarius, if you have a lot of marches, is going to give you a lot of value. Another thing we should consider with Belisarius, though, that is a disadvantage, there are two more. You need to expertise him. I mean, Belisarius, without the expertise, he's nowhere near as good. If someone came in my live stream or my comments and was like, I want to run Belisarius just to begin, what skill level would I go for? It's really expertise or nothing with him. Otherwise, he's not giving you much value. He's more like a dead weight. And at that point, I'd rather a William. So really, Belisarius, go all in or go home, because then he's not going to be nearly as strong. The other thing that is a massive disadvantage with Belisarius, you need 5 marches. I mean, if you're not running 5 marches, his expertise value is like 1/5 of what it can actually be if you're running 3 marches, or it's basically a half of what it can reach if you're only running 4 marches. So you need 5 marches really to get maximum value out of this expertise. Otherwise, it is not as good unless you're relying on like your allies to swarm down stuff with him, which is definitely something that you can do. But I usually like to recommend your mutable be self-sustaining, so you can give yourself all your buffs, you can give yourself all the debuffs you need, instead of relying on other people's active skills and other people's commanders, which can work, but is a little bit more chance-based and is a little bit more dependent on how active your mutable is, on how lucky you get with their active skills lining up, instead of relying on your own marches. Now, the next thing I will talk about is the best pairings for both commanders, and we'll start off with William. William's really only got 2 pairings, it's Hao Bing and it's Nevsky, and I guess you can also go Zhang Yu. These 3 commanders are all William's best pairings. Hao Bing is his easy number 1, and the reason is because Hao Bing once again allows William to raid your own troops much quicker, which means they get their active skills quicker, and it allows him to put this skill damage, like removal, I guess, onto your opponents much before they can throw their active skills. So Hao Bing's fast rage cycle right here, really good with William, and it does allow him to elevate himself to the next level. Of course, Nevsky, just a tanky strong commander, works well with a not so tanky commander, and then Zhang Yu is very similar to that of Hao Bing, works really well with William, just because you're going to gain a lot of rage really fast, and you can do all the same things, debuff your opponents, buff yourself, before they can really do anything to you. Belisarius Prime, his pairs are really the same. I mean, you've got Hao Bing, Nevsky, and you've also got Zhang Yu, and the reason that's the same case is Belisarius also needs a dumb fast rage cycle for him to be really good. The faster Belisarius' rage cycle, the faster you can put that silence on your opponent, the more kills you can get before they can damage you back with their active skills. The faster you can increase their rage, the better, and that's where Belisarius Prime definitely benefits. It's the fast rage cycle, and without a fast rage cycle, he's not as good. Of course, still works with Nevsky, tanky, strong commander, works well with not so tanky commander, but he definitely needs those fast rage cycles, and Zhang Yu and Hao Bing are easily his best pairings, with his best one just being Hao Bing, because it is a really fast rage cycle meta cavalry commander who is just going to trade really well. So with Belisarius, best pairing is Hao Bing. With William, best pairing is Hao Bing. And that's kind of where the conflict comes in of choosing which commander do you actually invest in. So now let's just finish off by talking about who invests in which commander. And we'll start off with Belisarius. And I think the players who invest in Belisarius are pretty simple. People who don't have William already, and people who are looking to make around 5 marches, or players who are newer to Season of Conquest and are making 2 cav marches. I would invest in Belisarius. I think it's not a bad choice. A lot of people are trashing on him just because he doesn't have AoE, and I think he's receiving more bias than it's worth. And of course, he's nowhere near as strong as Nevsky, nowhere near as strong as Joan, nowhere near as strong as Hao Bing. All 3 of these commanders should be done, or at least at a good level before you consider a Belisarius, but he is going to give you a lot more value, especially if you're looking to aim big by going for those 5 marches in the future. Also, if you swarm flags, if you swarm rallies and all that, he's a must expertise. I mean, I don't think I need to say that. His damage boosts are just crazy. So Belisarius, expertise is needed for pretty much any whale, but if you're running 5, 6, 7 marches, or you plan to at least do that in the future, Belisarius is worth it, because he's going to give you more long-term value. I think Belisarius will remain meta long after William falls out of the meta fully. So Belisarius, he's still good, don't get me wrong. Yes, he's not overpowered. Yes, he's not the best commander ever, but I think he's better for the people who have just hit Season of Conquest and they want to get a newer commander, because he's like 5% better than William. And I mean, unless you're just trying to make a rebellion against Lilith, you might as well get the 5% better commander, because 5% better overall is 5% better overall. I mean, from Chisco's test, he said he won usually by about 80,000 units for a whole mutable whenever he is running a Belisarius over a William. So we have to consider that it is still stronger, and I would say Belisarius is a good choice for the newer players and the players who do not have William. But once again, do keep in mind he needs to be expertise, and I would really only pick him up if you're moving towards 5 marches in the future or you already have 5 marches. As for William the First, I think the players who pick up William are fairly simple. Of course, if you've already got William, just don't get Belisarius. He's not worth it over William. You might as well save the gold heads for next infantries, next archers, even the next range commanders, whatever it may be. You would just save those gold heads instead of picking up Belisarius. So that's something I would like to mention. If you've already got William, don't get Belly unless you're a whale, because he just isn't really worth it. Of course, if you're running 3 cav marches, I do it, because you go Hauchebing, Belisarius, Nevsky and Joan, and then Zangi with William. But really, when you're looking at it, I would just get William and keep him if you already have him. If you're looking for a cheaper cav investment maybe, then I would go 5-5-5-1 William, and it is better than a Belisarius at that point. I think the value you get out of him for that 5-5-5-1 is going to be more than enough over the next year to 2 years, and it will last you pretty much what the gold heads will be worth. You'll spend about 300 to 400, and that's a decent number to be spending, but it's going to give you enough value that those 300 to 400 gold heads are worth it. Also, I will say that if you are a lower spender player and you never ever plan on going to 5 marches like me, I'm never going to go past 3 archer marches, then William is a better pickup. It's a bit weird to say that even in the current meta, he'll be better than Belisarius, just because William's going to give you overall more value than a Belisarius will. Of course, they both benefit from having 5 marches, but William still gives you all the same benefits even if you don't have 5 marches, whereas Belisarius, you need 5 marches to get all of his benefits. 5 marches at the minimum at least, because if you don't, you're not getting 12% more damage. But with William, you still get the defense, you still get the rage gain, no matter how many marches you have, and he is still going to be a powerful commander. And of course, works really well with Hauchebing still. So William is a very good pickup for people who never plan to go above 5 marches. Players who already have him, I wouldn't go and get Belisarius. And people who are considering a cheaper cav investment at a low skill level and maybe are saving for new commanders in the future, he's also a better option than Belisarius since he's about half the cost and you probably get 90% of Belisarius' value. But if you want the most optimal cav ball, you do pick up Belisarius. If you're new to Season of Conquest and you're going for 5 marches, you definitely pick up Belisarius. But William is a better choice for lower spenders who don't want 5 marches, players who already have him, or players who just want a cheap cav investment. Now, if you enjoyed today's video, you found it pretty interesting, then do consider giving the video a like. I don't ask people to like videos very often, but I also do very much appreciate it when you guys do give videos a like. So if you liked today's video, then push the like button, and it definitely helps support me and means more players can see this video so they can make a better decision for their account. So if you found the information accurate or you found it good and helpful, then consider liking the video, and it is always much appreciated. Now, I just want to say I thank you all for watching, and I hope to see you in the next one.